Hello everyone, so moving over to video number 2 now, to carrying on talking about Chris Packham, Inside Our Minds, the subject being dyslexia. So then Chris Packham looks at the science of dyslexia and he meets a neuroscientist professor called Joel Talcott. And Joel Talcott tells him that reading is unique, in fact it's a learned skill. Unlike, say, language ability or other human capacities, reading doesn't emerge naturally, it needs to be taught. Because as a species, we haven't been reading for very long. So the brain has to use different component systems, as he puts it, which aren't specific to the reading process. The brain has to recruit systems that aren't actually specific to the reading process, but it uses these systems that have already evolved for other activities, and it then has to use these systems to learn how to read. So, for example, the visual symbol recognition of the letters, the speech sound recognition of the language, but also the conceptual processing, which is the meaning of words. All of those things the brain has to do when it's learning to read. Again, he looks at neuroimaging, and they found that the dyslexic brain uses the same brain areas as do typical readers, but there's lesser coordination and lesser connectivity between these areas. And that's why it's so difficult to do a task where someone can say, look at a word, and be able to understand what it means. And these difficulties in coordination between different areas of the brain could also explain many of the other challenges. So they may have difficulties in other working memory tasks, for example, reading maps or understanding directions, following instructions, remembering words to a song, but also the ability to sustain attention to a task. So again, that's interesting because most of those, with the exception of learning lyrics, which, as I said, I can do well, I also struggle with. So I think those, again, are common across the learning challenges. Reading maps, can't read maps, unless it's Google Maps. Google Maps, because it's three-dimensional, it's like real-world navigation, so I could spend time kind of really assigning that to memory. Google Maps is different, but like regular kind of, ordnance survey maps, absolutely can't read them at all. My mum was really, really good at reading maps, so I didn't get that skill. I can't do it. My mum, funny enough, had excellent spatial ability, completely opposite to me. Things like, understanding directions, following instructions, I can't follow instructions very well. So again, these must be similar across the learning difficulties. And ability to sustain attention to a task can be challenging. Not being able to read can serve as a powerful mechanism for social exclusion, he says. Around 60% of children who have dyslexic difficulties don't have them picked up in primary school. Yeah, that's interesting. So, as I said, different learning difficulties here, dyscalculia and other things. My learning difficulties were picked up at primary school, as I say, so I don't have that experience of them not being picked up. They were picked up. My experience is that I wasn't given the right support, basically. And although they were picked up, I didn't get my dyscalculia diagnosis, which is actually very severe dyscalculia. I might actually do a video on that another time, but anyway, I didn't get my dyscalculia diagnosis until I was an adult. I knew I had dyscalculia. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but to get the official diagnosis, I think it was just, for me, it's just closure, I suppose, and it was diagnosed as very severe. Although I have developed certain coping strategies. But yes, I didn't have the official name for that as a kid. I'm not sure they really talked about dyscalculia much in the 1990s as a thing anyway. But anyway, back to the programme. Okay, now here I get to a little bit that kind of was a little bit annoying. As I said in my first video, the annoying thing when he talked about ADHD was when he talked about ADHD, not that he doesn't think ADHD is a disorder, and I was thinking that's deeply unhelpful. He did say at the beginning of this, because it is a disorder, he did say at the beginning of the programme that he wanted to dispel stereotypes. I think the programme generally did quite a good job at that, but the problem is I think that he actually ended up potentially endorsing certain positive stereotypes, and this, I think this was evident in his programme on dyslexia, because he says that today, he says, many organisations are starting to think differently about dyslexia, among them, for example, the UK Intelligence Services and GCHQ. They're actively recruiting dyslexic people who they say have the skills required to be spies. GCHQ is the UK's secret intelligence, cyber and security agency, and they intercept and monitor communications. And it is thought, he says, that dyslexic brains, does that really exist, dyslexic brains, but anyway, dyslexic brains, that seems to be quite a kind of homogenising statement, dyslexic brains, are well placed to tackle tasks such as these. A study by the charity Made by Dyslexia found that 84% of dyslexics scored above average in skills like pattern recognition and big picture thinking. It's claimed that dyslexics might be able to spot an anomaly in a huge data set that a neurotypical might not be able to. That enables them to see a threat. And Chris says that he has a detailed memory for photographs and paintings, but that he looks at GCHQ data and he doesn't initially see the pattern, so he struggled with that. This bit kind of annoys me because it's similar with autism and other things like ADHD. There's this claim that people with these conditions have kind of abilities in certain areas that can offset the difficulties and stuff. I personally, it doesn't sit well with me. It does seem to be, very much positive stereotyping and playing into the model minority myth, which I think I did a video on that before, the model minority myth, which is often used in terms of like talking about ethnic minorities. For example, this stereotype that certain ethnic minorities have a strong work ethic or are very good at maths. That's one stereotype. I think that's mainly for like people of Chinese origin, but they're like very good at maths, or really good work discipline and stuff like that. And like people from these minorities can end up developing really low self-esteem because if they can't fulfil